Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome speakers and participants, and thank you for joining us. The conference is jointly organized by left parties in Southeast Asia and Australia. There are Socialist Party of Malaysia, Socialist Workers Thailand, Labour Mass Party in the Philippines, Socialist Alliance Australia, Working People Party, PRP from Indonesia, and KPR Indonesia. So I am Pachini Kamnak, or you can call me Lek, and I will be the moderator for these sessions. But before we start, I would like to briefly go through some housekeeping rules. Number one, our participants are requested to respect differences in views and opinions. Two, please pose your questions in a short and specific manner to the respective panel for their views. Three, Q&A is not for debates, but for asking questions only. Four, we will not tolerate any derogatory remarks, sexist or vulgar posting in the chat, and the organizers have a right to remove such participants if they are found to do so. So we have a simultaneous translation in Chinese, Bahasa Indonesia, Malay, and Thai too. And for these translations, you can see this in the bottom right hand, the corner, right hand corner of the screen on the translation button. So now we have 52 participants, and please mute your microphones and when you are not speaking, okay? For the participants, if you prefer to write a questions or comment, please use the chat box which you can use throughout the whole sessions. And the topic of these sessions is revolutionary unionism, uniting the socialists and unionists for a workers' fight back. So today there are three speakers. Oops. It's quite blurred, my video. Number one, Luke Espe. If I pronounce your name wrong, please forgive me. Luke Espiritu, President of the BMP from the Philippines. Hi, and sorry. And number two is Sivaranjani Manikam from the Party Socialist Malaysia. And three, Bendy Agang from KPR. So, but the topic is about how effective are today's trade unions is representing the interests of the working class. And two, what are the challenges in uniting the working class movements and the struggles they face in their countries? So now we are facing the problem of bureaucracy or labor aristocracies in the trade union movement. So in the main and the main elements for revolutionary trade unionists. So we would like the speakers to explain and answer these questions. So I would like to introduce you the brief bio of the speakers. So the first one, Sivaranjani. She has been a student activist since her campus days in the UKM Bangui. She later played an active role in Community Development Center, or CDC. She is a committed activist and has worked for several years as a full-time with the PSM and experienced workers campaigners. She has a no-holds-barred attitude towards expressing her views. Sivaranjani was instrumental in the success of two national PSM campaigns, namely the minimum wage campaign and the employee insurance scheme recently introduced by the government. And the second one, sorry, Benny Akang is a Junila, a student, a member of KPR, and is also administrator of the SMI Central Committee. So KPR is a political front consisting of labor represented by FPBI and SPKAJ, Jakarta, youth and students represented by SMI, and rural communities represented by the BMI in Indonesia that focuses on handling structural problems and seeks to build progressive political parties in Indonesia. And the last one, Luca Espiritu, is the president of the Revolutionary Socialist Political Center of the Filipino Working Class, or BMP. And in 2018 and 2019, he was active in organizing the struggles of precarious workers and led them on the front lines of direct action through workers' strikes. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, his organization has been on the forefront of mass campaigning for human-centered solutions to the crisis, opposing corporate profit preservation. So now, that's all. I would like the Sivran Jani to speak first and foremost. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Lake, and thank you for the warm welcome. Salam Perjuangan, comrades. In today's topic, Revolutionary Unionism, uniting the socialists and unions for the workers' fight back. In this topic, I have 3 sections. One is like, I'll be talking about a little bit about historical background of Malaysian context, where the revolutionary unionism or militant unions was existed in the history. And then the second part, I will be concentrating what are the today's challenges we have in building the unions, especially when we talk about militant or revolutionary unions. What are the challenges we are facing today? And my third session, the third part will be like how we can move forward, the way forward, and what are the suggestions I have. So in the first part, talking about like historical, giving little bit like historical background and trade unions in Malaysia. If we see like in Malaysia, trade union or worker struggle can be divided into several phases. Like before 1930s, the workers were mainly organized by secret societies. So that played for the role of like more like a protectors. So the real like trade unions movement or the workers movements only started to form after 1930. And there was also a significance why after 1930s, there's a lot of like trade union movement was started to formulate. It's also because of the formation of the Communist Party of Malaya at that time after 1930. So the trade unions movement at that time after 1930 were more radical and also take a very militant stand. And one of the most notable and also like militant movement was the takeover of Batu Arang mines, which was the epicenter of the energy sector at that era. And this struggle was sometimes in 1936 to 1937. Batu Arang is a mining workers town, and then the workers like went on the strike, like around more than 5,000 to 7,000 workers went on the strike, and they captured the industry, the mining industry, and also the town. And also they they also claimed that like this is like at that time they claimed as a Soviet, you know, and Soviet, the workers take over this whole industry. It is a very important this struggle is very important and significant struggle, because the workers is not merely like putting forward the demands, but they also think like the bigger changes, like taking over the industry. And also like it is a very important town, very important sector, energy sector, where the Batu Arang at that time was the supplying of the energy for the entire country. And this was like a big threat for the British government. And this is like after 1937 to 1936, 36 to 37 was still under British colonial power. And this, of course, when it gives like a big threat, and this workers who take over the town, they rule the town for 7 days in those days. So after that, of course, it was like a big threat to the British, and it was crashed down. And later, if we see in 1941 to 1945, it was the era where like Malaya was under the Japanese rule, and all the revolutionary union movements at that time was joined hand with the Malaysian People's Anti-Japanese Army to bring down the Japanese rule, bring down the Japanese administration. So this was the merely a period of like armed struggle led by Malayan People's Anti-Japanese Army. So soon after of course, they won in 1955. They managed to crush the Japanese rule, and also like British backed to Malaya in 1946. And 1946 to 1948 can be merely say is a big golden era of militant and revolutionary unionism also in Malaya at that time. It's also because at that time, right after the colonial struggle, there was a little space was there for the unions to build the movement and the workers' struggle. And of course, one of the main Communist Party of Malaya was one of the main party who also like influenced a lot in the bringing up the workers' movement at that time. And general labor unions, more workers was organized into the general labor unions, and also Pan-Malayan Federation of Trade Unions during this period. These are the two main unions were doing the organizing the workers into unions, and many strikes took place during this period. And workers were not merely demanding just for the wages or the bad working conditions, but also like other social amenities. And many strikes brought successes during this era. And just in 1947 itself, more than 300 strikes was recorded, and more than 600,000 workers took part in the struggle and in the workers' movement at that time. And these unions at that time were more known as a trade unions. And also another important thing at that time, 67% of the workers in the country, this is like 2/3 of the working population, were unionized, and they were unionized under the general labor unions. And this is the highest record ever in the country. Even now it's like in a bad shape now, but this is the record of the country in this era, 1946 to 48. And the Pan-Malayan Federation of Trade Union also joined a left wing of Putra AMCJA alliance during those times, pushing for the people's constitutions. And seeing at this militant movement, working class movement at that time, the British was terrified with the strength of the trade unions, and where the biggest threat to the colonial capitalist power. And of course, they went on to crush these unions by declaring an emergency rule in 1948. The time when the time where the emergency rule was in place, it purposely to crash down the militant unions and also the workers' movement, and 98% of the militant unions was banned. And obviously the General Labor Union and also the Pan-Malayan Federation of Trade Union, who played a very important role in organizing the workers, become illegal. And many unionists were killed and also banished to China and India. And right after that, after the emergency, the British government also introduced the law, Trade Unions Ordinance Law, to regulate the unions. Before that, the unions was not formally was registered. They were formally like organized into the bigger coalition and fight. But after that, after the emergency was over, the Trade Union Ordinance was in place to regulate the unions, start to registering the unions, creating a lot of yellow unions, and also started to asking the workers to organize into the trade-based, occupation-based, and also industry-based unions. This is to split the strength of the workers' movement. And also, there's another rule was brought in, like civil servant workers were split from this bigger coalition. So they cannot be in the private sector unions. So they were separated, civil servant and also the private sectors. Then the post-independent, post-Merdeka, after 1957, there's also like not many militant movement or militant workers movement was not many, but there is one where I can highlight here is like in 1962, railwayman unions, railway workers unions, they went on the strike. This is like a big strike in Malaysia post independence, where the 14,000 workers went to the street, and they were like demanding like wage claim. They also demanding to abolish the casual employment in the system. And also like this strike went on like for 23 days. And they won in the demand. And then the unions like this in 1962, this struggle, I mean, this workers strike gave a little bit like motivation or to other unions to pick up the footstep. But it didn't went very long. And the government of the day, alliance government, crushed this. Like there was another emergency was declared in 1964. And right after that emergency, we had another law into the place. So the government of the day was thinking like, okay, how do we stop this industrial actions? The workers shouldn't take the strike as a solution. So they came up with another law, Industrial Relation Act 1967, which any dispute, industrial dispute, need to taken to the conciliation process or taken to the court. So there's no need for strike. So this how historically there was a militant unions and militant workers movement was crushed by introducing the laws. And after that, until today, we do not see any like revolutionary trade unionism exists now. More like the trade unions now become very weak and even weakened after the Mahathir's era, after 1981, and where the Mahathir bring lots of neoliberal policies, and he crushed more the labor movement, and he even encouraged more like in-house unions to weaken the national unions' strength. And this becomes like the today's situation, where we only have now 6%. We have 15 million of workers in the country population, and among the 15 million of the population, workers population, only 6% of the workers are unionized. So this is the current situation of the workers movement in the country. So with this current situation, we need to rebuild the militant unionism or the workers movement, but we have a lot of challenges. What are the challenges we are facing day by day? The biggest challenge, though the workers have so many issues, and we think based on these issues, we can bring them together to fight for their rights. But there's another bigger struggle is the racial ethnic politics. Workers are divided into races. So we have this primary issue. We are stuck in these primary issues. How do we bring the workers which are divided into several races? There's always a lot of suspicious among them. So it's a big struggle, big challenge for us to bring them together. The second challenge, I have noted down about 7 challenges here. So the second challenge that I feel it's difficult to create like militant or the workers movement in this country because of the trade unionists or the leadership that exists now, more like a careerist trade unionists, where they do not have any like a working class consciousness, and more the job is like just to be in the power and then contesting for in their own election, like internal elections, and then remain in the power and then do some administrative issues, and never really like involving in organizing the workers. And the third challenge is like, of course, the strong pro-capitalist government's labor legislatives is a big obstacle that you have seen historically, like every time when the workers movement become in the high peak and there was a laws being introduced to crush this movement. And we do have until today these obstacles where a lot of like laws, trade union laws, are not really like allowing the workers to form the unions. There's a lot of bureaucratics involved in forming the unions. And despite of that, some of the workers who comes forward to form the unions, they will be victimized. And lots of union busting issues existing. And with this union busting issues and bureaucratic issues, many workers who takes up the initiatives end up in taking up cases at the industrial courts, and it like again like bringing down their level of like involving in the building the unions. And the fourth challenges is like a precarious working condition, and definitely we cannot deny that there's a new form of emerging working populations, not only in Malaysia, in the entire world, like in the gig economy workers, the workers who are in the online platform, and also like the workers, outsourced workers, the workers on the temporary employment, the workers who are working in the flexi hours. How do we going to capture them? These are the emerging and then the arising working populations. And we seems like there's no any organization or the trade unions are involved in building or in organizing this group of workers. And the fifth challenge is like trade union model itself looks like a very outdated or not really an attractive model to the young workers who are existing now. So they don't see, they see this trade union structure is something like a very elite structure and not fit into them. And they see do not have the revolutionaries ideas or formula to organize them. And the sixth challenge that I have listed down here is, of course, the rice ball issue. That means not the workers with this existing like so many challenges, existing the conditions like this, how workers will come forward to organize themselves and then to fight on their rights, because there's a lot of fear in losing the job. And also the characteristic of the workers today is so much of individualistic, and they were thinking about all their own problems, and they don't see the bigger picture. How do we want to solve the bigger problem? So it's very hard for us to fight actually against that individualistic characteristic, and they are with so much of commitments, financial commitments, so they are not ready to take on this kind of like work, coming into the union and coming into workers organizations and getting them involved. And also there's another threat in the country is like reserve army, and Malaysia is one of the country with big migrant workers population and also refugee workers population. So the minute the workers are going on strike or going on the industrial action, going into like forming the unions, the employers always have the reserve army to replace them. So this is also another threatening point for the workers who doesn't want to get involved into the workers movement. And the last challenge I have listed down is like sectarianism of the workers movement. That means there are organizations apart from the trade union. Trade union is only about 6% of the workers are there. We have about the biggest number, like 94% of the workers who are not been unionized. So there's a lot of like organization like PSM also involved in organizing the workers. But everybody like working in the different organizing platform. And do they have the interest to come together and then like form as a bigger coalition? And this is also we think it's very difficult to bring these organizations together and see the fighting in the bigger coalition. So these are the challenges that I could able to see in organizing like a militant or the revolutionary unionism or workers movement in this country. And the way forward, I only have 3 suggestions, and also the suggestions that PSM, as we are doing and also like need to do. And I think, but that's in maybe later in the discussion, there could be more suggestions how we can move forward. The first, we think like, how do we want to use the technology in organizing the online platform workers? Because you see, the nature of the work is so different, the online platform workers. We cannot think about the traditional way of organizing them. Maybe we need to come up with an apps to organize them in online. So this is something that even we PSM also thinking, like we even have like some of the attempts like, okay, we wanted to do this like informal sectors workers, we need to organize them. Okay, we find a platform, like online platform to organize them. So this is something that we think it's important in moving forward. And the second one, like we need to look back. Why those days in historically, why the general labor union was so successful in those days? Because it's also like one bigger umbrella who can bring like all the working forces into one organization and able to build that movement. And the fight also not just about demanding the wages. It's also so many other issues, bigger issues. So this kind of like movement is important now. And I can also like wanted to raise this, like, because we PSM, we find this a real need for this kind of movement. And also we have ventured into like one of the idea of Marhain. Marhain is a bigger umbrella where we have like various sectorial workers being organized under this Marhain umbrella. We have plantation workers, we have like contractual workers, we have like farmers, and we have like urban pioneers. So every sectorial work has been organized into like one umbrella. So, and we could able to bring them together for a bigger discussion, a bigger fight. So this is the second idea, way forward. And the third is like, how do we have a lot of key leaders, and we have doing a lot of like PSM, like I would say, like we have a lot of like members, or we have a lot of like key leaders, workers in the ground who are doing a lot of like work, like handling the disputes, the cases among the workers. But are they really like militant our militant organizers? Are they militant organizers, or they are so-called like welfaristic organizers, or will they be like able to take up this struggle like working class consciousness struggle for long run? What is we need to do? We need to do like education, like we need like Marxist school, like for the activists or the key leaders, workers key leaders who are involved in the movement, in the workers movement, that the work that we are doing, we need to get them involved, so that we are not really like doing like a more like a short term like demanding like a very economic based demands, but it's not like really like taking into like changing the system into that. So we need to have those kind of members. So we need, if we want to have those kind of members, we need to have like a platform to educate them. So this is like 3 suggestions that I could say from my hand. And as a conclusion, I feel like there's no any other shortcut in building the workers' movement. This only way is like people like you and me. We are the conscious mass. We are the one have to come forward in doing the entire organizing work, organizing the workers. And there's a real need now. There's a condition now, but I think whether the left have captured the condition and then we really like have the key leaders. We really have the people like this. What we say like people like activists, the strong leaders to capture this momentum. So this is very important, and we really need to organize the workers and educate them to become militant. Then only we can see changing the system.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sivarejani. That is quite interesting issues to be discussed. So we would like to go to the next speaker, Luke from the Philippines. So you have about 20 or 25 minutes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Comrades from Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Australia. I'm honored to be part of this Socialism conference. I have prepared a simple slide for my presentation. Now, the labor movement in the Philippines follows the general pattern. First, trade unionism cannot be but start as political trade unionism. It's still economistic in the sense that workers would fight for their economic demands for a formation such as a workers' formation cannot avoid to be involved in the political questions of the day. And that's what the Philippine labor movement experienced in its early beginnings, because unionism in the Philippines started even during the Spanish times. They were not called unions, they were called gremios. They were like workers, association of workers. And the first strike, I think, was recorded during the Philippine Revolution against Spain and the war against the Americans in the newspaper La Independencia. And later on, in the early 20th century, the Unión Obrero Democrática was formed, and it led to a lot of strikes. And this huge union or worker formation did not only limit their benefits, they did not only limit to the economic demands, but also was active in the fight for Philippine independence. Now, that is a general pattern which I would see also in other countries. And the Philippine labor movement also followed the pattern of the state, of the Philippine state, under the Americans, the American colonial period, up to the independence and the Philippine state would try to control the political aspect of trade unionism by promoting yellow unions. And so we have, as of now, that same division between unions that are what we call yellow, or those who only push for the economic demands of the workers, and unions who which do not limit themselves to these economic demands or struggles, but link these economic demands and struggles to political questions. And that's the great divide that we still have in the Philippine labor movement. Now, so I will go continue with my slides. If we but I would like to point out that the number of unions that are merely into the economic struggles of the workers, they are the majority. Uh, those who are more political unions are in the minority. And those who are in the majority push for what we can call or term as the traditional type of unionism. And the traditional type of unionism would be characterized by number one, the workers' economic struggles are the core. That's the be all and end all of forming an organization of the workers. That is to push for economic betterment of the workers. And number two, this type of unionism that we see in the Philippines, and also I think is also a model in other countries, is that it confines itself to the legal framework. Meaning to say, uh, it makes use of what is written in the law, the rights of workers defined in the law, and the remedies or the steps, the legal way of obtaining these rights of the workers. Under the Philippine Constitution, workers have the right to collective bargaining. They have the right to security of tenure. They have the right to strike. They have the right to self and healthy working conditions. And the traditional type of unionism is to make use of these legally defined rights. That's why in the traditional way of forming a union, there is a proliferation of what we call paralegals. These are non-lawyers. These are volunteers, organizers in federations or labor organizations, whose job it is to act as lawyers in our labor tribunals. Because our rules, under our rules, you don't have to be a lawyer in order to practice labor law. You can still practice labor law as long as you are part of a labor organization. There is a proliferation of these paralegals, and it kind of promotes this type of traditional unionism because they just make use of the legal means of obtaining uh, the rights that are defined by law. And they do it by filing cases when there is termination. That's the service of a labor organization to file a case in order to challenge termination. If a certain group of workers want to form a union, then these paralegals will assist in order to address the legal needs of this group of workers who want to form a union. If there is a union already recognized, these paralegals will also assist in negotiating with management for a collective bargaining agreement. So the traditional type of unionism, we produce a lot of paralegals or non-lawyers who practice labor law. And in the traditional type of unionism, the purpose of forming an organization is eventually to be able to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement with management, where you could enhance your salaries, You could raise it above the minimum wage. In the Philippines, we have a legally mandated minimum wage. So a CBA would be in order to raise salary levels above the minimum wage in order to obtain uh, leaves, paid leaves, sick leave, vacation leave, in order to obtain better rates for overtime and all other benefits. Now, in the traditional type of unionism, that is the meat and the heart of why you're going to organize a union. Then, in the traditional type of unionism that we see, which dominates the labor movement in the Philippines, is the concept of industrial peace, meaning to say, it is part of the existence of a union and the responsibility of a union to have good relations with management under the framework or under the reasoning that both management and workers, they are partners in the business or partners in the workplace. The worker cannot exist. This kind of thinking is the worker cannot have a job if there's no capitalist. The capitalist cannot engage in business if there are no workers. So they are partners. So the path forward for them is to have good relations and to have what we call industrial peace. And there are several types of federations and organizations who subscribe to this view of maintaining industrial peace, that we could reconcile the interest of capital and the interest of the worker. And so this type of unionism gives rise to what we call labor aristocrats. These are labor leaders who earn or profit, in fact, from their role as leaders of traditional unions. They are like spokespersons of management. They act as intermediaries between the worker and the capitalist, and they have more benefits. They get more power, and sometimes and it is not uncommon that these labor aristocrats would also act undemocratically. So that's the traditional type of unionism that we have, that we experience here in the Philippines. On the other hand, can we go to the next slide? Yes. On the other hand, my organization, which is Bukluran ng Manggagawang Pilipino, if you characterize it, it belongs to the militant type of unionism. That is, economic struggles are simply part and parcel or linked with the systemic roots of the workers' problem. Every economic problem of the worker, it is linked with capitalism. Capitalism simply depresses wages. Capitalism simply does not recognize the rights of workers unless draws a link between the economic demands and needs of the workers and the systemic roots of why these economic demands exist in the first place. Why in this system it is actually a struggle. It needs the workers to will towards organizing themselves and to struggle in order to get even the simplest of concessions. That is because the system is stacked against the worker. The system works against the worker. So there is a recognition of that link. Then in the militant type of unionism, economic and political struggle go hand in hand. So you just don't go and negotiate collective bargaining, but you organize in questions outside of their workplace. Workers are organized not only in order to negotiate with with the business owner, but also in order to demand from the state policies and laws that that are important aspect, to push forward workers' rights. Now, like for example, questions such as precarity. We call our precarious work in this country, we call it contractualization. Uh, Workers are hired by a third party contractor, and they are deployed to the workplace, and the capitalist will pretend that these workers are not their workers, they are the workers of the third party contractor. And this is fraud and deceit committed against the workers, because the true employer would be the company, and not the contractor. This question, for example, cannot simply be solved inside the workplace, because there are laws that allow for this type of an arrangement. Therefore, workers would have to struggle politically in order to remove this type of an arrangement where workers are employed, so-called employed, considered employed by the contractor, and the company which provides the work can pretend that they are not the employer. So we engage in political struggle against this type of an employment setup. Then third, unions and worker organizations are considered, if you're a militant type of a union, you consider unions, and not just unions, worker organizations, because there are non-union organizations. They are considered a political force rather than simply a group of workers who want to push for economic benefits. They are a political force in society. Then fourth, if your union is the militant type, you consider the interests of the workers and the capitalists are antagonistic. They clash. They are not reconciled. They are antagonistic. And industrial peace is not a product of simply bowing down to capitalist demands or having good relations with the business owner. Peace in the workplace is simply a result of a new balance created because of struggle. The workers and the business owner, they struggle and they arrive at some kind of a truce. They arrive at a new balance, and that's where we arrive at what we call industrial peace. And number five, in the militant type of unionism, you don't create labor aristocrats. You create worker leaders. Now, these are the types of labor organizations and labor unions. But actually, being a militant type of union is not our ideal. For us, socialists, we do not end up with a political type of, we don't end up with, for example, like the Labour Party in the UK, where they have a political party and they could engage in politics and they could even win elections. That's not the end point for socialists. The goal for socialists would be this next slide, third slide, please. Yes. The ideal for us socialists is for the workers to be a class force in order to build socialism. Now, that is what we are trying to build on. That means that the workers are not only struggling for their economic needs, and not even the ideal would be for them to have class consciousness. That our society is developed is composed of antagonistic classes, the capitalist class and the worker class, and they know their place, that they're the workers, and they know their historical role in society. And that would require a merger of the workers' movement with a consciousness, a socialist type of consciousness. And we treat unions and worker organizations not merely as any group, not merely as a social movement. It is, we treat it as a, or we build up our workers as a revolutionary fighting force in order to achieve socialism. And we would like to reach the level wherein our workers' movement will be uh, will be strong enough and politically conscious enough and organized enough in order to take over the state and abolish capitalism. And this would require the development of a layer of advanced workers. The worker mass uh, would have different levels of development. But what we could do is actually to gather the more advanced layer of the workers in order to push this movement forward towards socialism. Now, that's the ideal. What are the challenges that we see, that I see, based on experience also? Number one challenge in order to do this is the fact that precarious work is now a very dominant form of work in our country. I mentioned a while ago about the employment arrangement where workers are considered employees of a contractor, third-party contractor. They are not considered permanent workers of the business establishment where they report for work. They don't enjoy security of tenure, and the effect of that is workers who are precarious would have to uh, work harder or spend more hours merely to survive. The minimum wage in our country is not enough in order for for their families to live. So workers in our country need to juggle between either 8-hour or even 12-hour work because they have to go overtime so that they could earn extra. Then after working, they have to go and find some extra income by driving for Grab or similar businesses. So they can only rest when it's time to sleep. Uh, in the 24 hours of a day, maybe they work more than 16 hours. So just in order to survive. And if we have workers like that, when we organize them, this is a real problem. We in our meetings, when we gather them for meetings, they're already tired because they have to survive, and they don't have time even to think politically, and that's a real challenge for us. Number three would be the ideological sway still of the ruling class. Imagine in our country, we are now we are going to hold elections in May of 2022, and it is still the ruling class candidates who top the surveys. They're still going to win the elections, despite the fact that workers understand and know that they really won't do anything in order to better the lives of working people. But still, they hold ideological sway, so they still dominate. Ruling class ideology still dominates. And another challenge would be, I wasn't able to include it here. Another challenge would be the repression. Repression in the workplace. When you form a union, there will be sure to happen. So there will be union busting, termination of worker leaders, and it is not limited to the workplace. State repression of the workers' movement is it's still happening in this day and age. In our country, we have what we call the anti-terrorism law, where they could label an organization as a terrorist organization and could arrest members of that organization and prohibit or proscribe that organization from ever recruiting or meeting or even functioning or doing propaganda. So there is state repression at the level of the state, and there is workplace repression. And we have experienced now an increase in the number of trade union leaders who are simply killed by state forces. Now, next slide please. Yeah. What we see is as important right now, given these challenges, we are starting with uh, accumulation of experience, because what the worker need is to gain that confidence once again, that uh, they could uh, do or achieve what they want through their own organization, not merely through the law, but through their collective action. So once the workers experience that they have power in their collective action, the start of their condition. And what we do this by making use of not only legal, but even extra legal tactics. And we also our own BMP school, where we gather the advanced workers in order to study socialism, in order to effect that merger of the workers' movement and socialist consciousness. And number four, what we're trying to do is we are trying to organize and gather a layer of the advanced workers in order for them to lead uh, their own uh, their own class, to lead first as a fighting force and and in our efforts from 2018 to 2019 and even until now, we have organized a number of collective actions, and there are examples that I have listed here. I won't discuss this one by one. I'll just have to generally describe to you what we did. We organized the precarious workers uh, in order to form a union, not with the contracting agency, but with the principal company. And once we organize these workers to form a union, we try to achieve their regularization for them to become permanent employees, not by filing cases, but by demanding from the business owner that they should be regularized, meaning to say they should be considered permanent workers. And this led to around 11 strikes as of now, from 2018 to 2019. And there are a number of strikes that we've had, which resulted in success. Workers getting regularized not by filing cases, but by uh, asserting their right to be considered permanent workers through strike actions. I could cite three examples where total victory that they were regularized was achieved. And in others, there are some concessions given to the workers. Now, the reason why I am citing these examples, because we have seen through our experience that when the workers have started to organize and struggle and use collective action as key, everything else will follow. It opens the door to the raising of their consciousness, and it opens the door for them to find the confidence to organize, and for them to realize the need for a workers' movement. Now, that's all, and maybe later, if there are questions, I would entertain the questions and answer those questions. Thank you very much. Lek, back to you.
Thank you, Luke. Quite impressive presentations because we have a lot of questions in the Q&A box. So the next speakers, Benny, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Comrade.
25 minutes to 20 minutes,
Okay,
please.
okay.
Yeah, sharing.
Can I share my PPT? My PowerPoint?
Yes. You can share screen. Click the share screen and yeah. Did you already open your file?
You can share screen now, comrade.
Oh, good.
Yes, greetings all, comrade. Thank you for the insight about history progressive movement in Malaysia, Comrade Siva Ranjani and Comrade Luke, elaborating on the labor movement in Philippines. Very insightful and enlightening, of course. And good afternoon, everyone, of course, in Jakarta time, because I don't know what time it is at your current location. Let me introduce myself. I'm Benny from Kesatuan Perjuangan Rakyat Indonesia. I will try to elaborate on the theme given by the Committee about Revolutionary Unionism, uniting the Socialist and Union for Workers' Fightback. Yeah, about 3 points that I will convey. My position about class struggle, problem in Indonesia, and I will present problem in Indonesia and what sort Marxists in Indonesia do. I will present my material briefly. I will try. I hope I can finish my assignment. How long is my time limit? Sorry. Okay.
First, Benny, can you expand your presentations?
Okay. First, I want to say, in the next context of the class struggle of workers, I would like to start from an objective standardization. At this point, we should be absolutely clear. What I mean by objective standard here is not only a matter of scientific objective, but more importantly, ideological objectivity. Scientific objectivity must be subject to ideological objectivity. Ideological objectivity is an inevitable fact. The objectivity can only be accessed toward certain subjectivity. I would like to elaborate on this view further, but my English skills are not possible. It's I'm sorry. In short, I would like to say that the most basic ideological particulars.
Make it full screen, please.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, basic ideological particular specific position is its class position, not others, because workers as the class here, the ideological importance is clear, namely not just normative right, no wage increase, not human right, not equality, not work safety, the interests of the workers as the class are just this: the complete destruction of the system that forever makes them an exploited workers. Capitalist system. And sorry, capitalist system, come on. If a worker or one who claims to have a worker's perspective has no political interest in the destruction of capitalism, and cannot have this interest objectively, then it's not really a part of the working class itself. Why? Because workers tend to see their misery and oppression as purely ethical and moral issue. State crime, patriarchal plots, human greed, Western hegemonic, and so on. An absent perspective is one that sees this misfortune as a result of systemic inequality in capitalism, which can be seen at least in these three relations: class relation, political economy aspect, production relation, social economy aspect, and labor wage relation, political business aspect. These three relations they manifest in what we call state crime, state absent, Western domination, and so on, seeing ourselves as a class and our struggle as a class struggle rather than mere drama of the hard struggle of life is the only way for us to embrace the political subjectivity of the working class. Come on, the working class. Sorry. Working class. Yeah. Working class, yeah. Since the 1980s, the economic development model in Indonesia has not prioritized the creation of formal and decent job. Indonesia is more focused on fulfilling the world market demand for primary commodities based on natural resources such as coal, CPO, and petroleum due to the natural resources scarce and Dutch disease. An industrial product with relatively small added value ultimately create in current economic structure, also with the weakening role of the manufacturing or premature deindustrialization, which is marked by decline in manufacturing value added. Grab one, it also impact the number of formal and decent jobs created that are not sufficient to absorb surplus worker. In addition to premature deindustrialization, the resource curse also occurs in Indonesia after reformasi 98, the commodity cycle that occurred in the 20s increased the demand and price commodity as coal and palm oil drastically. As result, there is crowding out of investment fund and human resources from the labor-intensive manufacturing sector to the primary sector. The private sector is starting to leave manufacturing because the return and investment cost and disproportionate to what can be obtained in the primary sector. As a result, natural resources such as coal and palm oil become export commodities that boosted Indonesia economic growth in the decade of the 2000. This is reflected in the share of total export natural resources 1999 to 2004, graph 5 in 2000, palm oil and coal were not even included in the list of the most dominant export commodity. 14 years later, palm oil and coal have become Indonesia's main export commodity, as well as other export commodity such as electronic and textile. Okay. Electronic and textile. Low labor productivity has always been justification for the Indonesia government in setting low wages, such as today PP 36, which is a technical regulation of the Omnibus Law, which makes the wages of workers in Indonesia increase very small, even not increase at all in some areas in Indonesia. Our productivity growth tends to slow down so that ultimately our median wage increase is not proportional to the increase in the minimum wage. Why is it limited? Yep, because manufacturing was abandoned. Then the government compared the wages of workers in Indonesia with other countries in Southeast Asia, such as Vietnam, Bangladesh, they say wages are too high in Indonesia, so the Indonesia government must provide incentive to foreign entrepreneurs in the form of legalizing regulation, politik upah murah, how the position of living manufacturing and prioritizing extractive in Indonesia has a major impact on workers' increasingly vulnerable status. Oh, according Mark, of course, as a special mechanism for capitalists to keep wages from rising beyond the limit conducive to profitability of capital. Basu, the existence of sizable labor queue is also a mechanism in capitalism mediate the supply and demand for labor and ensure that real wages are kept within favorable limit for capital accumulation. John Smith. Yeah, wage inequality. In central capitalism, countries with preferential capitalism is not caused by the laws of pure market economy, but because of the influence of the power of labor movement. Yeah, the industrialization, surplus labor, reserve army of labor, politik upah murah in Indonesia. Yeah. In 2017, Indonesian worked 2,024 hours a year, 50% longer than German, who only worked 1,354 hours a year. It's clear that Indonesian workers have worked that is twice as large as workers in Germany, but their beginning position remain weak due to low productivity. Again and again, due to manufacturing abandonment, because many surplus workers are not absorbed, employers do opportunistic hiring. Yeah, Bagan in Indonesia, Reserve Army Labor. This row chart, Reserve Army Labor Indonesia. The table above show that the number of reserve workers continues in increase every year. Their number on average is above 50% of the total workforce. This condition affect work relation in the formal sector. Labor in Indonesia are in problematic condition. Those who are not absorbed in formal work become informal workers with vulnerable working condition, less productive without social security, legal protection, and minimal wage. Starling kopi sellers, Starbucks keliling, Javans kuli Jawa, domestic workers, tire repairs, lay tambal ban, or driver ojol, Gojek, Grab. According to Statistik Indonesia data for February 2020, around 28.15 million or 19% of the workforce in Indonesia are informal workers. The quality of formal work is also degraded and causalized by the widespread practice of labor market flexibility, such as contract work, outsourcing, apprenticeship, magang. It means the working condition and wages of formal workers are equally vulnerable. This condition occurred before the government ratified the omnibus law omnibus law on job creation. The economic vulnerability of informal workers makes them carry out the role of a reserve army of labor for entrepreneurs capital or capital owners. As a result, the beginning position of the working class in the formal sector will be weakened. Employers can track to gladly replace formal workers who resist or engage in union activities with large number of informal workers queuing outside the factory. For example, at the beginning of the labor pasca Reformasi 98 in Indonesia, there were around 9 million workers in association, but today it shrunk to around 2 million. Of this, the percentage of workers who are members of progressive unions compared to unions that do not have a class perspective is quite unequal, where the number of members of progressive union is tiny. This condition makes it difficult for workers' consciousness in Indonesia to transform into political consciousness until it reaches class consciousness. The class reaches class consciousness, the class of proletariat. And 3-4, sorry. Yeah. Therefore, the economic agenda of formal job creation become essential. However, the agenda of job creation in Indonesia align with neoliberalism logic, which will always make workers more vulnerable and away from their political awareness. Furthermore, the jobs created are not commensurate with the corrosive effect on the environment. The progressive movement must offer an alternative economic development agenda. The agenda needs to place the creation of formal and decent job as one of its main objectives. Furthermore, the economic development agenda needs to be progressive, strengthening the power of the working class and weakening the power of capital and market in politics and the economy. Yeah, this according Michael Kalecki. Discipline in factory and political stability are much more valued by big investor than profit. Their class instinct tell them that long-term condition of full employment are unacceptable in their view, and employment is an integral part of the normal capitalist system. Yeah, some things that can be suggested to get 3 will with all the limitation are
Conrad Bendy, you have only few minutes left.
Okay, Conrad. Okay, but first necessary is understand the importance of industrialization and manufacturing industry. Second, encourage industrial policy. Trade using industrial policy to build a coherent economic structure and create intersectoral strategies. Fourth, ensure the economic development result can benefit people and distribute more fairly and equitability in society. Sorry. Yeah, there are 2 political phenomena in Indonesia. First, the first 2 years of massive mass action, reformasi di korupsi and mosi tidak percaya against omnibus law. And second, the establishment of parties with movement background, such as the Partai Prima, Partai Buruh for the 2024 election, or the 2 even without thinking about the problem in advance. The first will only end up as heroism of the moral movement, like most of the movement in Indonesia has been. And the second is if the R2 program pragmatic to participate in 2024 election and ignore the existing material condition, in the end, the parties will simply become insignificant and will inevitably be forced to form coalition with the bourgeois party whom they have always considered as an as enemy. And the last socialist and union socialist organization and union in Indonesia. First, not many organizations that claim to be socialist have direct relationship with the workers' movement. If any, they can be cited be very small in quantity. Meanwhile, there are still many socialist groups who also romanticize pre-industrial working conditions on the issue of the current exploitation of capital in that many youth commonly studied in Indonesia or talking about or even interest in Marxism. However, it is only the level discussion group that is had not yet been manifest in building the consciousness of the working class mass, was consciousness is still underdeveloped. Second problem, the socialist movement in Indonesia, which is unable to unite, and even some tend to be hostile, is very complex problem in itself. It has long historical roots dating back to 1926, although the issue is not ideological nature, is purely political in my opinion, of course, because Marxist was on grade was very big and Indonesia at the beginning of the 20th century was accepted by the people or Indonesian national heroes such as Cokroaminoto, Hatta, Sukarno. They accepted Marxism in the very pragmatic function, a tool to liberate Indonesia of colonialism Belanda. They accept the Marxian is but are not a position to really agree with Marxism ideal of creating a classless society. Third, being a Marxist in Indonesia must have considerable privilege coming from an upper middle class family. Just check the figure of Marxism in Indonesia because access the theory of reading of the magnum opus Marxian, you must at least understand English for no. If in the past, besides being able to speak English, you must have at least a college abroad to who can provide reading material today. Marxism is more developed and accepted among young people because of technological development. One variable, of course, this is very reductionist. However, they are not or have not yet bound themselves with revolutionary progressive organization, especially to have long-term program. I remember saying what Rosa Luxemburg once said, the merits of Marx and Engels with to bring together socialist intellectual at the university, most of whom had bourgeois background with workers who fought again but had no imagination, only stopping at normative awareness, namely demanding an increase in wages to make workers whose consciousness is economizing have a revolutionary consciousness. We solved, me and my Marxist friend in Indonesia realized the simple thing. Instead of rooting is not clear because the RBUZ defining in the Indonesian middle class. The leftist or socialist movement in Indonesia must begin to reflect on real problems faced by workers, surplus workers, informalization of workers, declining membership of labor organization, and fear trade union with a class perspective. We are beyond able formula and alternative agenda. The movement will lose in its relevance, and the joke that Slavoj Zizek told were not longer funny that because it has become reality. One might live this pen, remain optimist and say, don't worry that situation may be dark, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. You know what's my answer? Of course, it is another trend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benny. So now we have only about 35 minutes for questions, and there are a lot of questions in the Q&A box, especially from Thai participant. I would like to translate into English that Thai Yuki, she would like to ask the Sivaranjani that how can you organize the informal workers because they are quite scattered, and how you can convince, how you organize the workers not to be unionism, just that fight only in for the economy issues or legal reform. So how can you organize it more radicals? And they is the questions for the Luke that how many unions are there in the Philippines, and what is the percentage, and what is the relationship between revolutionary unionists and the socialist parties, left parties in the Philippines. And yeah, and you can see that I would like to brief the questions, and then after that, speakers will answer. And there are some comments from Rizal and Raja, quite long. And for Luke Espiritu, there is questions from Terry that they are split among the progressive workers in the Philippines, and particularly in the labor left. So how do you engage in this situation to strengthen the workers' socialist movement in the Philippines? Please note that, and if we have time, we answer these questions, please. And the questions from the Indonesia as well. And from Tayuki, she's really want to know that how can we build up the organic intellectuals for workers' organizations? Yeah, and there are some questions from Indonesia. Wait a minute. From Indonesia, I'm not sure that many of members of reactionaries and paramilitary groups are actually working people. So what could how could to drive working people to choose reactionary group over the trade unions? And how should we develop class consciousness so we have progressive and revolutionary working peoples? And so another question is to Kamlat Luke from the Philippines. Is the demand on permanent employment part of the economic struggles or political struggles? In what aspect that we can see that demand to be revolutionary? So I'm not sure that. So try to answer these questions. Can we start at the Luke first, because a lot of questions for you.
Okay, percentage. Thank you, Lek. Percentage of unionized workers in the Philippines, less than 10%. Our labor force is about 40 million, so less than 10% of that is unionized. So be around. So it's a very small rate of unionized workers. The majority would be non-organized, non-unionized, and are precarious. Now, what is the relationship of socialist organizations and parties with workers' organizations? Very, very close link. It's an organic relationship, because that's the natural base or force that any socialist revolutionary organization would have to organize. You cannot avoid having a worker base if you are for socialism. So that happened in the entire history of the labor movement in the Philippines. Prior to the entry of socialist-oriented groups, or even revolutionary groups, workers have been mobilized for a lot of political reasons. The revolution against Spain was organized by a worker, Andres Bonifacio, whose birth date we will be celebrating on November 30. During the struggle against the Americans, when there were no socialist organizations yet, workers have been politicized. So it's just logical for the first socialist movements, even communist parties to be organized in the Philippines, for that link to be created. And in fact, the first communist party in the Philippines, created or organized in the 1930s, came almost exclusively from the workers' movement, not from intellectuals. Crisanto Evangelista was a worker. He was the founder of the Partido Comunista ng Pilipinas, meaning to say, in English, the Communist Party of the Philippines. Now, the present CPP, a split from the PKP, is also named Communist Party of the Philippines in English. There would be organizations that are worker organizations from the militant in our country. Now, there's a split in the labor movement. The split this did not just happen today, but what is more hopeful, what gives us more hope right now, is from the state of split. The labor movement has been split for a long time, but from this condition of split, there are efforts of unifying. In 2019, not only in 2019, but I would like to cite that as an example because it is a watershed in the history of the labor movement. We ran candidates mainly from labor, from the different major labor organizations in our country. We ran candidates from labor, from different labor groups, from Kilusang Mayuuno to BMP and from FFW. Traditionally, they're not together, even in political mobilizations. But in 2019, we had 3 candidates from each of these labor groups. Now, I think it is more positive than negative. The split is a matter of default. We come from there. We come from labor organizations, just existing on their own. But now there are efforts. Now, in the 2022 elections, we have not fielded a common slate of candidates, but it is not. It is an idea that is not abandoned. It's just because of the circumstances of the 2022 elections. We were together in the fight against contractualization, precarious work, and we are together in the fight against the fascist regime of Duterte. We unite in order to oppose Duterte. So I think it does not describe it fairly if we just emphasize that we are divided. Yes, we are divided, but there are efforts in unified struggles. Now, is permanent employment economic, political? How can it be linked with the
Okay.
It is of course economic. Even if you're political, it doesn't mean that you are veering away from the economistic nature of the demand. It is an economic demand, yes, but it is very, very important, very important that if you organize the workers, you have to link their economic demand with the systemic roots of the problem, because it is the start of class consciousness. It is the start of the work being merged with the socialist movement. We have workers coming from a condition of demoralization. They are very demoralized because of a lot of factors, because of the effects of the neoliberal policies that have been implemented for decades. We have problems of precarity. We have problems of repression. So when we go to the workers, we start at the very bottom. When we meet workers, they start from a condition of fear. They fear fighting. That for them to be able to organize around their economic demands in forms that are militant and veers away from the traditional manner of improving their condition, which is just filing cases, organizing unions for CBA, up to collective militant action. That in itself is an improvement. We do understand it is economic, but how can you build towards a strong workers' movement to fight for socialism if we don't start from there? We cannot start from a vacuum. We are starting under this condition. So it is, yes, it is economic, and sometimes it is being rendered political form in terms of mobilizations outside of the workplace and in terms of demanding from the government, yes, but it is a necessary step. Thank you. I hope I answered all the questions. Back to you, Comrade Lek.
Okay. And there are some questions to for the civil journey, especially how you organize the informal workers and how to get them involved in the Socialist Party as well. And
thanks, Lake. Yeah. Thanks,
sorry,
Lake.
sorry. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. And one more questions. What is the revolutionary trade unions, and what is your opinion about Indonesia migrant workers in plantation in Malaysia? And what and two more from Indonesia that how should we develop class consciousness so we have progressive and revolutionary working people? So these questions are quite the same. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Lake. Maybe I could share some of the efforts is being taken by PSM here, the Socialist Party here, in organizing the workers, especially when we talk about the informal working workers. Like one of the sector that I am involved in organizing, cleaners in the schools, and then in some of the government sectors, government premises, where they're working in the government premises, but they work with the private contractors. So this is the outsourcing. Government outsource the job to the private sector. So how do we organizing this workers, the contract workers in this government premises? This is the area that I am heavily involved in the last 5 to 6 years. So how do we organize these workers? Maybe I can share my own experience. Like we have launched to see the working time and everything is so different, and the traditional way, like we get the workers to come in to form and in the network is so difficult. So we launched actually the hotline, nationwide hotline for this particular workers. That means every workers in this line, they have so many issues, the small issues. They're like the contractors are being contractors terminating them once the contract, like it's a very short-term contracts, like after 3 years they will terminate them. So they want to seek for justice. So they want to look for who will be helping them. So we have this launched like hotline in the country, and then we have like a state level coordinators who will be handling on the hotline. So we start to receive calls from the workers. So that's how we get them involved. So we handle them their primary issue first. There's no other way for you to run away from their primary issue. So when you don't tackle their primary issues, they are not going to come into your bigger goal, what you want to achieve. So this is how we are getting them. Despite of like our hotlines, we also do visiting to these premises. And we have a lot of activists, and in the state level, we do visit to the premises. We have like membership. We have formed a network for the contract workers, because the workers shouldn't feel they are alone in this struggle. So we need to give them some solidarity. So how do we want to organize these workers? They do not have a union. They do not have a formal union. So we came up with an idea of network. So the contract workers, government contract workers network. We started to organize them into this. And there are like two sectors, because you see Malaysia, it's so difficult for you to form a union, because it's like sectorial unions. In this sector, in the government premises, the two category of the workers that we are organizing is like cleaners and also the security guards. See, there's a two sectors of the workers are in one network, but you cannot apply for forming a union, because you need to have like each sector one union. So we are stuck into this kind of like technical issues. But despite of that, you can still get them into this network and actively involve them to fighting their issues and bringing up their demands to the government. So this is how we are approaching this informal sector like this, and we also came up with an idea like how do we want to handle this online platform workers, the gig economy workers. Okay, now we have created this network also to like bringing up all this online workers into this network, and then they can start from there. So all these networks should be under one big umbrella, and this is the umbrella that I said in my presentation called Marhain. That means it will not be just the workers networks itself, it will be also bringing other sectorial issues together under this network. This is one of the way that how we organize the informal sectors workers by PSM. And there was also like questions from one of the comrade in Indonesia, like we have a lot of workers from Indonesia in the plantation sector in Malaysia. So how they were like, are they been organized into the unions? And I would say like in Malaysia, though the Trade Union Act says that they encourage like migrant workers, including the Indonesian workers, they can join the union, no problem. But there's another law, immigration law, because they are migrants in these countries. There's another law will be saying something contradicting to this. It will say you cannot associate yourself with any association. So this is where they will be stuck in most of the time in this contradicting thing. Despite of that, there are initiatives taken place in the ground. There are initiatives taking place in the ground to get these workers to join, in the union. But it is we have two levels of struggle here. Okay, one is the local workers. Another one is the migrant workers. When the local workers, they don't see these migrant workers as their ally, how do you want to unite them? Because now they see them as a competitor. They see them as a competitor. They are here to taking away their job. So how do you want to, and we should able to imagine how difficult it is to bring them together in forming in one union. So this is another like a problem which is existing. Okay, I will try to speak slower. And there's one more comrade also raised up the issue that the union are here to allow you to form the trade union. So what is the problem? Why we can't form the union? Right? Correct? The union law says you can form a union. You only need 7 people to form a union in Malaysia. But what is the purpose of the union? If you ask what is the purpose of the existence of union, mainly the whole purpose is to do the collective agreement. But to do the collective agreement, you need to have like 51% of the workers. You should have organized 51% of the working population in that industry, and you need to get a recognition by your employer for your union. And most of the time, the employer doesn't want to have the union. So is it going to be a very smooth process to get the recognition from the employer to start off the union? So this is where the the union busting comes in place to crash the idea or the initiative of forming the union. So that is another I mean, there's a challenges. Despite of challenges, I'm not saying we should give up. No, we shouldn't give up. But we need to also find other ways. Like how we are in PSM, we think, okay, fine, there's a lot of challenges in forming the union, but we need to find other ways to get the working population to come together. So what are the other avenues? We think about it, we create a network, we create an association, we create an NGO even to organize the workers. So it all can be done. And is there any other thing I missed out?
Okay.
Someone asked about whether this.
I would like to move to Benny.
Okay, thank you.
Oops, excuse me. I would like to. Yeah, there is some question. There is questions for Benny. Where is it? Here. To Benny, that from a socialist perspective, what was the contribution of the labor movement in the fight against the omnibus law? But what were also the weakness or the challenges faced by this protest movement? And you can answer about how to organize the informal workers as well. Yeah, and how to organize them to be more like a radical and more progressive in the socialist idea perspective. Benny, please.
Okay. Thank you for question. Sorry.
Like it's about the omnibus law that
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the labor movement.
Yeah, from a socialist perspective, what was the contribution of the labor movement? The
to
against
fight.
the omnibus.
Yeah.
I don't know what contribution means, but all the workers were clearly angry when the omnibus law was passed. It just has admitted that the spontaneous movement to reject the omnibus law was not initiated by a progressive movement, although there are those who initiated their voice, they are still inferior to the middle class group. Influencer on social media, so-called, whose resistance is more moral nature, or in fact with liberal politics like Hong Kong, maybe, who talk about democracy. Also triggered by the romanticism of the student moral movement since the 1970s, but it doesn't really have a strategic progressive political agenda. In building class consciousness, we can base it in economic determination, I agree, informal or formal, but today's culture industry has deviated many ideologies. The condition of workers who are faced formalization and surplus workers, so that they have to compete to become formal workers, so they don't have time to organize, talk about socialism, and it's impossible to imagine world without capitalism. Progressive movement must be able to answer this problem. We cannot imagine a revolution will erupt because people are starving to death. How could a dying man you speak to take up arms? But in response to his economy needs, it is very likely that he will talk about the hopes that must be realized alternative to a future without capitalism. Thank you.
Okay, that's all. Thank you. Uh, Actually, there are some questions, and we have time about 10 minutes. The question is about, yeah, there are some comments left that you can, we can read it here in the Q&A box. And yeah, and there are some questions from Thailand that how to, because it seems that the revolutionary unionism need general strike, right? And we did we should we refuse reformists or build alliance with the government authorities like police, something like that, because it's there are some proposals that we should build more alliance, but in the revolutionary unionism perspective, that how can should we refuse that or not, and about general strike as well. Luke, can you help explain?
A form? Is that the
Yeah.
question?
Is the as in the revolutionary unionist perspective, we need not only the socialist organization to build develop class consciousness, but we need like a general strike.
General strike. Yes.
And you are successful about that, right? And can you help?
No. Okay, it is not a general strike. It is an establishment strike that we have. We are limited to that right now. But I do agree that as a form, a general strike is very, very important in order to accomplish our aims, especially our revolutionary aims. Now, right now, are we capable? It's still a question that we have to answer, and our capability to do that has to undergo a lot of patience, develop worker confidence from their condition of demoralization towards a fighting attitude. It's very, very important. And workers must be able to develop tactics and strategies in order to strengthen what their collective action can bring forth. And one of that would be their capacity for general strike. Now,
Oops.
It is not simply general strike of
the signal is lacking.
Of getting specific reformistic agenda to take state power. Hello? Yes, was I clear, Comrade Lek? Okay. From a general strike towards a political strike towards paralyzation of the entire society, definitely workers must be able to have that kind of a capacity. But we have to undergo a period of build-up. Okay. And I think that period of build-up is what we are experiencing right now.
Thank you. That's all. Yeah. Can I move to Sivaranjani? Can you help talk about how to build general strike? And we know that in Malaysia there are like union busting, right? And someone asked you that Mr. Sufian that he is wondering if it is legal for companies to put in anti-union in the employment contracts. Yeah, so can you help explain this too? Thank you.
Yeah, for the Sufyan's, Comrade Sufyan's questions, I think I already answered. They cannot have such clause in the employment contract, and all the workers in the countries are allowed to form a union. And the problem only starts after you take the initiative to form the union. So the second, general strike, is it possible? I just want to answer honestly. Just by PSM alone, it's not possible. With the capacity of the organizing work that PSM alone doing is not possible. But if the trade union in the country, MTUC, Malaysian Trade Union Congress, and there's a QPAX, there's a civil sectors union, there's organizing the civil sectors workers in the country. If all of us comes together and to have this national strike, general strike, it is possible. But the bigger question is, even for the unions to organize the strike in these countries, they need to get a permission from the Director General.
Oh.
Okay, so the law technically is not allowing the unions, the formerly existing unions, to go on strike. And despite of this law, if the unions
go beyond the ceiling, go beyond the ceiling.
Yes, if the unions are going to go beyond these things, I don't think so. That kind of revolutionary or militant situation is existing now. As I said earlier, the more trade union leaders in these countries, it will affect their careerism, right? They would not want to go against all this. So I would say general strike possible if all forces can come together at this point of time, and only by PSM it is not possible. But there are a lot of protests for small demands are happening here and there. And I would like to even for PSM have played a very important role in these countries, like bringing up like minimum wage act in this country. So there was a lot of continuous demonstration and protest and organizing the workers and putting forward the demand to the government. We have achieved for the in started since 2001, and then we managed to pressure the government to come up with the minimum wage act in the country in 2013. Yeah. So this kind of things are possible, but general strike, I think now is very difficult, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe we should find ways to do that. So, and the last, Benny, can you have some opinions about organizing or with the informal workers and general strike, and how to
Okay.
Last one.
Closing statement ya. Okay.
To make it the labor movement more like radical, like develop, and informal workers.
Yeah, you still have to stop the production of machine if you want to hit capitalism.
But how can some questions is about that general strike. Okay. More answers? You want?
Please continue next time.
Okay, and and it seems that we have only 2 minutes left, and I would like to wrap up for a few minutes. And these sessions, we speakers are trying to explain about the some types of unionism in nowadays, especially the traditional oligarchy unions, and how to make it more militant unions. And we try to and they speak revolutionary unionism with relationship with the socialist idea and how to build the class consciousness as well. And there are some examples in histories in Malaysia and in Indonesia and the Philippines as well. So we need to bring the history for the labor organizing nowadays too. So thank you, comrades, for this, for speaking for these sessions. It's very informative. Thank you so much, and thank you, interpreters and participants. There are so many comments and questions too. So